Welcome to the Investor Coaching Show. Here's your host, Paul Winkler.
And welcome to the Investor Coaching Show. I am Paul Winkler, talking money and investing. Joined this hour with Ann Sawaski. Hi, Ann.
Hi.
There we are. Let's go.
We're ready.
We're ready. Want to know how to stay mentally sharp in your 80s and beyond?
Yeah. Tell me.
I think it'd be good. Economist Chapman University just finished writing a book about Adam Smith. One of our favorite people around here because he wrote The Wealth of Nations. Now, I that's part of what caught my attention on this particular article, because when we talk about investing, you actually had something you brought up, and I said, oh, isn't that funny? Because I actually included that in our workshop that we teach on basic investing.
Right.
And it was a story that came up today, and I'll get back to Adam Smith in a second because it's all related. It was about Lyft stock.
Yes.
Yeah, talk about that. What happened with Lyft stock that is really instructive for investors when it comes to how stock markets price things? Because what people typically do is they try to figure out which companies they want to buy, and they try to figure out which ones stocks are going to take off, or which areas of the market are overlooked, undervalued, need to be considered. And they're looking really for, as we call it, mispricings, where the stock is priced at a different price than what it really is worth based on, the earnings of the company and the sales and those types of things. But what happened with Lyft?
Yeah, so this was actually kind of a classic example we would use of why market timing doesn't work.
And stock picking, for that matter. Yeah, but
And
they're very
stock
related.
picking,
Yeah.
But anyway, so Lyft, as all big publicly traded companies do, they will put out their earnings report. And so they did. And they projected that they were going to be expand this year by 500 basis points in their profitability. So
That's
a
lot of profit. Yes.
So stocks surged 67%. Because this was not the expected amount of
right.
gain. It was way, way more than it was supposed to be. And this happened instantly. So this is how fast the markets work.
Yeah.
Is literally overnight, when people were asleep, the market was still working, and it went up 67%.
And if you look at the chart, I think it's one of those things that's really helpful. It's like it's the polar opposite of another chart that we use in our workshop. Now, we use this one chart where we're actually talking about that there was a tweet.
Yes, a false tweet.
Back when you had tweets.
Yeah.
This is what they called them, but still people call them tweets. But it was a false tweet about the White House being bombed.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden what happened is the stock market dropped down, and they figured out, oh, no, it was fake. And the market goes right back up to where it was, and it trades as it was.
Yeah, in minutes.
Because that information was literally digested, and it happens in seconds. I mean, literally, you say minutes, but it's even seconds that it happens.
Yeah.
But what happened here is that was bad news, and the stock market went down, and then when they found out that it was fake bad news, it went right back up.
Yeah, so what happened here was less than an hour after they put out the statement, the CFO of Lyft said, "Oh, you know that earnings projection we were off by a zero."
It
we
just
accidentally
makes a little difference.
An extra zero, so it wasn't 500 basis points; it was 50, which is 10 times less? I mean, that's like a pretty big difference.
And the point is that when we look at markets, you have all of these people all around the world betting, so to speak. I use the term bet because, you think about, when you're betting on something, then you have, so many points that the team has to cover or I don't know much about that, but, I know that you might have, we're going to take this team with 7 points to win the game,
Right.
So in other words, they got to win by more than 7 points, I guess is the way it works, but it shows you how much I know. But the idea being that you have all of these different people, and it's hard to beat it because the general consensus of all informed investors is that a stock should be selling for a certain price.
Right.
And then all of a sudden this news comes out and says, oh, we were really wrong about that. And that is what's so frustrating about it. It was like Matt Murphy and his wife and Eric and I, we were all getting together and we got to talking about this. And they were just sitting there going, whoa, this is really, really interesting. Because I was talking about how pricing happens. And they were just, well, so this is what Wall Street's doing all day long. And the reality is that nobody gets a leg up on anybody else over any length of time where they can consistently figure out where things are mispriced. And I was like, yeah, exactly.
Well,
you're
and
getting this.
Yeah. And the interesting thing I think about this particular case is the 67% jump happened after the market closed. Which tells you, again, it's like you think there's just a market, quote unquote,
Right.
in the U.S. and it's from,
But you have derivatives trading after hours.
Well, but you have worldwide markets trading too. So all over the world.
Well, what I'm talking about is when you look at, like, for example, if you ever watched TV, and I'm not talking to you, Ann, I'm talking about to you folks out there. If you ever watch TV and you're looking at what the market's going to open at,
Right.
it's like, how do they know the market's going to open at? That's because of futures. That's what they're following, futures. And think about futures as being a derivative. It's a stock derivative. Its value is derived based on the underlying stock. So, so back to Adam Smith. Adam Smith, this is what he said. He said markets are efficient.
Right.
And they will become more efficient with two things, is what he was known. And he wrote The Wealth of Nations back in the 1700s. And our economy is based on what he was writing. And he said there's an invisible hand. You try to get very smart people in a room together to tell you what prices of goods and services are appropriate, what commodities should be selling for, what crops should be selling for. Back in his time, that's a lot of what was being traded, right? And what you're doing is you're hoping that those people are so smart that they know better than the general consensus of all people that might be actually buying that stuff and determining what the demand for that stuff is, that they know better. And the reality is that when economies have been set up that way around the world, that's why so often you'll hear people rail a bit about government, big government. Because big government comes in and says, oh, we got to do this, we got to do this, we got to set up this regulation. And you look at countries like China. And China's talking, it wasn't just China. I mean, you go back before China, you go back to Russia in the 1970s, and people thought that China, Russia was actually going to do really, really well because they were producing more shoes than other countries around the world. And, you had pricing of cars and things like that. Well, what the problem was is that the government was setting those pricings. They were setting how shoes were produced and how many shoes were produced. And what people didn't quite get, even economists were fooled by this, was that they were producing garbage. And what happens is the government says, hey, we need to really focus on this industrial sector and we need to be doing that. I remember back years ago, Ann, there was this big push by American manufacturers. They were upset that Japan actually had a leg up on U.S. companies because the government was funding some of the research and R&D in TVs.
Oh, okay.
And what happened was, they were saying, "Go, you got to do this, you got to do this." Well, at that time, our Congress was not terribly favorable to going and bailing out companies. And the interesting aftermath was that U.S. companies, not backed by the government, but backed by their own ingenuity, ended up coming out with better technology than the government-funded companies of Japan.
Well, when you think about it, that's not too surprising.
It isn't. It's surprising if you're somebody that thinks the government really has it together. It's not that surprising.
I don't know how many.
If you're
seriously, how many people would say anything run by the government is run well or better? I don't know. Not too many. I know. So it kind of makes sense that would be the ultimate result.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Adam Smith, he wrote The Wealth of Nations, but this economist at Chapman University just finished writing a book about Adam Smith, it says here, and works about 8 hours a day, 7 days a week in his home office in Colorado Springs. I don't recommend it. 7 days a week's a bit much. You need recharging. As I often tell people, you take vacations, you take time off, because people hire you for your energy, your ideas, and your enthusiasm, and you have none of those if you don't take any time off. But anyway, he says, I still have a lot to do. I want to keep at it, says Smith, who won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2002. Who am I to argue against a guy that won the Nobel in 2002? But, he looks at, and it says, recent memory flubs by President Biden, 81, former President Donald Trump, I guess they got to get both sides, have kindled debate on how to stay mentally sharp in your 80s beyond. There's no silver bullet. But basically what this guy says, he says, people, cognitive performance peaks in healthy adults in their 20s and 30s. Over time, the brain shrinks, and it's about 5% per year. I've seen data on this before. It is actually true. And the outer layer thins, deeper regions become scarred, and communication between neurons become less efficient. That's how information gets around in your brains. I use that. I use the example of pathways. Like, if you walk through the forest and there's a path, and it's well worn, that path, you see the dirt and you go, wow, that's something. And so a lot of times we get really stuck in our thinking because those pathways get worn that way. But he says these brain changes can cause memory, reasoning, and other cognitive skills to erode, but some people can stave off cognitive decline better than others. This neuropsychologist from Columbia University, Yakov Stern, says, the brains might be more resilient to change and have better cognitive reserve, the ability to adapt to brain changes. Genetics is thought to play a role, as does diet, exercise, a person's risk of vascular disease. And, that's why exercise is such an important part of, as people get older. I used to be, years ago, when I first started this radio show, it was like, how did I put it together? Well, I had people that were sponsors of the show, and one of them was a gym. And I'll never forget talking to this one guy that worked at the gym. And he and I still stayed in contact from time to time, but he would talk about getting people in exercise and how he would literally help them not only cognitively, but help them off of medications with the exercise that they were doing. So there's a lot to be said for that. But brain changes, a lot of it is diet as well, but a lot of it is just literally keeping the brain moving.
Yeah, exercising your brain.
Mm-hmm. And he talked about here that you have the super agers have mental faculties of people decades younger. And what they find is that these people have a purpose. It's one of the things that they found in the research. Now, we say a lot of this stuff because I want to take a break, but I want to talk a little bit about, we think a purpose is kind of important around this place. And we'll talk a little bit about, what our input regarding that is, because a lot of people go through depression, anxiety, and have all kinds of issues as they age, and they start to feel kind of like, what am I here for? And I hear that a lot. But there are things that we can do, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And we got something coming up. I'm going to talk a little bit about something we got coming up and let you all in on some of the things that we're doing around here. Because I think we got some cool things going on around our place here. But I want to talk a little bit about that and then talk about some things that I think you can do just to deal with money better, because Adam Smith, when it comes to a Wealth of Nations, market efficiency, he was onto something. And it grew the United States economy at a greater rate than any other country around the world. Still, if you look at it, something like 60% of the value of companies worldwide are U.S.-based companies. There's something to that. And what we find in investing is that the philosophy that doesn't work in terms of growing economies tends to dominate in the investing world. So I think this is, Ann, you brought up an interesting article. You were talking about something during the break. What was that?
Are you talking about
The
can
CFPs?
a CFP's advice improve a marriage?
You want to improve your marriage?
Yeah.
There you,
So
they did a pilot study on this.
yeah, now this is a preliminary
funny.
study, but it is put out by the CFP board, so I'm just saying.
Well,
But-
of course, there's no bias there.
Yeah.
Well, so Leah, just to, so you and I are both chartered financial consultants, which is the same curriculum in the Certified Financial Planner, but there's a couple of extra courses, and
Right.
there's a comprehensive test with the CFP, where each one has a test in the CHFC. So it's basically I'm indifferent between those two designations. The way
Right.
I look at it.
Right.
But, so when you hear CFP, Certified Financial Planner, they just have better marketing than Chartered Financial Consultant. But it's the same college. The same college actually teaches most of those courses.
Right.
But yeah, I was just like thumbing through the article, and it said something to the extent that they had 70% of those served by CFP professionals said they were very satisfied with their marriage versus 45% by a non-CFP. There you go. It's almost double. No, not quite double. No, that's not exactly. But and there's this. What was this one thing? I see this line here. It says, this one is probably my absolute favorite data slide, says Luter, who is a licensed marriage and family therapist. That's the degree that I've got. In addition to the chartered financial consultant and all those other degrees. But it says, because while I said I don't use the pilot data, maybe you can kind of use this one a little bit because it's so exciting. It definitely represents other data that I have collected. And, I think just looking at this and just thinking back to, okay, so what is the data? What are the things that we typically study in getting these degrees? You'll have like general financial planning principles would be one of the things that you study. You're going to, professional conduct. You're going to be looking at making sure you handle yourself well, and insurance, risk management.
Yeah.
Investment planning would be another area that you're going to be looking at.
Law and estate
planning. Yeah, for sure. Estate planning, retirement accounts, and retirement planning. But I think just the process itself of planning. You're dealing with getting on the same page with each other when you're making decisions.
Right.
And you're not necessarily hiding information from each other anymore. Matter of fact, you're not. You're bringing it all out, and you have to communicate about it. And both people feel like that they've got a part in the process. So I could see where, you look at that and you go, correlation isn't causation. But I can see where a lot of these things we're getting into discussions and deep discussions can lead to better marriages and better communication, and both saying, hey, honey, I want to do this. Well, I want to do this. What do I want in retirement? I remember, there were guys that I have worked with. I remember one, and we got into a conversation, well-known person, very well-known person in the Nashville area. Don't have permission to talk about a situation, but I remember talking about what he wanted retirement to look like, and his wife had a different idea, but they came to a compromise that both of them were happy with, but if they had never talked about it, that would have been a different deal.
Well, and that kind of gets back to one of the whole things I like about the American Dream experience, too, is that really it gives you 2 days to sit down with your spouse or your significant other and really, really figure out what you both want and how you're going to get there. But I mean, to your point in general, I just want to bring up, as a woman advisor, I think it's so important for women to take an active role in their finances with their husband, because I have a lady who, just became a client. She's elderly. Now she kind of has some cognitive issues. Her husband handled everything. And now it's really difficult because she has no idea.
Real good point. And I think, think key to success many times isn't always having the right answers, but it's asking the right questions. And that's part of it. Is there are a lot of questions to get you thinking about, what do I really want to accomplish and how do I want life to look? And I think that's why it's key.
And just what are we doing?
Right.